All right.
Kafches, Amid Beis, the bottom, the Mishnah. Bechor shenofel labor. A bechor is an animal that's the firstborn, and the bechor has to be given to a kohen. Now, what does the kohen do with it? If it's a tamim, the kohen has to bring it as a korban shlomim. And if the bechor gets a mum, so it then becomes a personal asset of the kohen. The kohen can shecht it as chulin. So there's a big difference because it's much more valuable as a tam, because as kodshim you can only eat from certain parts of it. And certain parts of it have to be given already as gifts. Chulin, you can only eat it over a 24-hour period. Once you shecht the korban shlomim, chulin you could stick in your freezer. You can eat it over 6 months. So there's a big nafkamina whether it has a mum or not. Now, a bechor bizman hazeh, where we don't have a Beis Hamikdash, you may not eat a bechor unless it gets a mum. And the kodshim, it's not like other kodshim where I have to declare it hegdish. Harei zu shlomim, harei zu chatas. It's based on my verbalization. But a bechor is miskadesh me'elav in the womb of its mother. That's why even bizman hazeh, a bechor has kedushas bechor and cannot be eaten unless it has a mum. So a bechor shenafel labor, a bechor fell into a bore on Yontif. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, yered mumcha v'yireh. Get a ladder. Let an expert. You have to have special smicha, just like we have smicha for yara yara, we have smicha for yodin yodin. It takes an extra 10 years, usually, to get the choshen mishpat yodin yodin. Then there was other credentials. You could view. You could be a mumcha who knew how to view mumim to be mater bechor. That took extra certificate, extra training. So take one of these mumchas, bring him down, let him check the animal. Yesh bo mum. If it has a mum, ya'alev v'yishchot. You can take it out of there, and you can shecht it. Bim lav lo yishchot. Doesn't have a mum. There's no point in being a shoichet. You can't eat it. Reb Shimon Amar kol shein mum nikar mibod yom, ein zeh min hamuchim. You have to designate it. If it was designated before Yontif, then it's muchan, but it was not designated. But my kamifli, what are they arguing? E name a baroyin mumin kamifli. Are they arguing in the principle whether a mumcha can check an animal? Rabbi Yehuda sover roin mumin beyond it, and that Rabbi Yehuda allows it, and Rabbi Shimon sover ein roin? No, because liflagu baroin mumin dalma. Why did you have to come up with the case of an animal that fell into a bore? You could say, here's a bechor. Can you check it or not check it? If that's the machloikas. So the Gemara says bechor shenafel labor itzrach chalei. There's an extra chiddush dealing with an animal that fell into a bore. Because maybe we should do a harama. We should trick it. Because there's tsar balichayim with the animal in the bore. It can't breathe well. So maybe we should do a harama and take it out. And then once you take it out, because of tsar balichayim, then you can check it. Rabbi Yeshua, Kamashman. So the Gemara says that can't be Yachi lo yishchot. It should say lo yalev yishchot b'boile. The Mishnah shouldn't just say you can't shecht it. You can't take it out and shecht it. So lo tzricha do over v'aske. Let's say he was over, and he took it out. Sagadach amina maybe lishchate. Kamash Malon, that we're not shoiched it, even if at the end he ended up taking it out. Halacha says, like Rabbi Shimon, we don't check mumim on yontif. So what do you mean he had to have a mina to shechted? Hatamu. It could have been very well unblemished. So lo tzricha denafel be muma. That there was a mum when they brought it out, they checked that there was a mum. But it was not roy lachila because it was a tam before it fell in, and therefore you had not designated it for eating purposes. So it should be muktzah all of yontif. Ella says the Gemara denafel be mum oiver me'erev yontif. Erev yontif it had a passing mum, which could heal. And now, after they took it out, they found that there was a permanent mum. Maybe because it had a mum oiver on Erev Yontif, he had his mind on it. Maybe it is muchad. That no, even to that extent, since it was not muchan properly, we don't shecht it. Don Rabbanon, b'chor tam shenafel labor. You know that this bechor is unblemished. It fell into a bore. Rabbi Yehuda Nasi Omer Yevid Mum Chaviyira. An expert can go down and check it. Im yesh bo mum, yalav yishcha, because then there's a purpose to shecht it for yontif. Vim lav lo yishcha. Omer lo Rav Shimon ben Menasya. They've said that. How can you say that a mumcha should go down? We don't check mumim on yontif. So Ketzar, how does it work? Noilid bo mum me'erev yontif. If an animal in a bechor had a mum erev yontif, ein mevakrin also be yontif. We don't check it on yontif to see if it's a mum that you're allowed to shecht for it. But if a person was oiver, says Rashi, and checked it, you can be shoiched it. Because you're not misakin it, because it was already close bein hashmoshes to be misukin. Because it had a mum already. The only thing it didn't have is the Riyas Chacham. The Chacham didn't see it. Now, Noilid bo mum b'yontiv. Now, if the mum happened on yontiv itself, so we already had in our Mishnah, Rabbi Shimon said it's not muchan. Rabbi Shimon has been a muchan. Vishavin, both Rabbi Shimon and Rabbi Yehuda agree, she'im noilad hu umumo imo, that if an animal was born on yontiv and it had a mum, it is min hamuchan, because there was no tikkun. Was already born that way, and also because they could erev yontif, it could have been eaten through the shechit of the mother. And we'll see that the dayanim were sitting right there when the animal was born, so there was never a period where it was usher. It was always because they saw the mum right away. Dorish Rabbi Ravuna noilad hu umumu imo. If the bechor is born with its mum that day, you can go check it. An expert. Amalei Rav Nachman. Abatoni im over ubikro. If a person, according to the opinion that says you're not allowed to go, but he was over and he went, we say mavukar. The language over there is clearly a lotion of b'di'evet. How can you say that lechatchila they can go? Omar Abaya, kavaset Rabbi Ravuna mistavra meditari tlosa bavi. He has three different stages. He has stage noilid bo mum be'erev yontiv. If there's a mum be'erev yontiv, ein mevakar noso b'yontiv. You don't check it on yontiv. Lechatchila hu de lo. You shouldn't go l'chadchila. The evet shapir dami that if it's checked, it's considered mevukar. Then we had a case of noilad b'mum b'yontiv. Rab Shimon said ein zemen amuchan was not muchan from erev yontiv, and dafilu diavad nami lo, and therefore if somebody came and checked it, it wouldn't work. And then the final case, the third case of Hadar Tani, Vishavin she'im noilad, if it got the birth of the bechor was yontiv, and it, with the mum with it, that even he agrees shezem and amuchan. Dafilu l'chadchila nami, and l'chadchila dayanim can go to check it right away. Rav Shia came with barisis in his hands. Whether the mum came erev yontif, whether it came on yontif. So how can you say it is min amuchan? Ela kasha. So it's not a kasha. He adabar uchmihi. That barisa that brought that faulty information is adabar uchmi the mishabish v'tani. Many times he brought barisas that were confusing. And Arav Dach Bar Yitzchak Masis Nami Deik, I'll prove from our Mishnah that we are correct. That mumo imo you could check l'chadchila. Diktani. Rav Shimon Amar Kol Shein mumo nikem erev yontiv. If the mummer is not identified erev yontiv, ein zem nemuchan. Now what does that mean? My ein mumo niker. I le mishein muker niker klal. If there's no, then pshita, then it was not min amuchan because it couldn't have been eaten. Would you have to say it? Ella, there was a mum. Rather, they just didn't show it to a chacham to say whether it was a permanent mum or not. Tani mias, whatever you want to say, it says ein zem amuchan. And on that day, it was born by that day, it's not been a muchan either. So says Shulchan B'chor Ba'mum, Shenoel B'yontiv, Imasa Shaloi Kedin V'ro Chacham V'tiru Nishchat V'alpiv. Really, l'chadchila, you shouldn't check it. If it was checked, and there is a mum, you can check it. Now, Bizmanenu She'ein Anu B'kimim Kol L'chadoshav Ein L'shachtum Shum Chashash Nevela. We don't know if it's fully a full term cow, therefore we don't shecht it bisman hazeh. Then the din is if a bechor was nolad on yontif without a mum, and only later on a mum fell, again, l'chadchila you shouldn't check it. If you checked it, mutter lishchot b'yontif. The Prima Godim says asers. Boy minei hilam erabo. Yesh muktzah l'chatzi Shabbos, or ein muktzah l'chatzi Shabbos? Is there such a thing as something being muktzah part of Shabbos and not part of Shabbos? If it's muktzah for part of it, does it become muktzah for the whole Shabbos? Heichida. If something was roy to be used ben hashmashos, so ichazi, so you can use it. It's not going to be muktzah. Either lo yachzi. If it's not roy for use, then it's muktzah all of Shabbos. So the Gemara is struggling to find an example. What do you mean chatzi muktzah for chatzi Shabbos? Lo tzricha the achzi v'hadar itchi v'hadar ichzi. Initially, ben hashmashos, it was roy. Then, for some reason, it became not roy. Then later on, it became roy again. My, what's the din? Armelei yesh muktzah. There, for the period of time that it was not roy, it was muktzah. But then, when it became okay again, it's okay. So there's yesh muktzah l'chatzi Shabbos. So esvei, we ask us here, shavin. That if the bechor is born with its mum, both Rav Shimon and Rabbi Yehuda agree that it's not muktzah. Ve'amai. Now, why? Nema, hai bechor mikar havi chazi agavime. When Ben Hashmashos came, The Bechor was in the womb of its mother. You could have eaten it if you shechted the mother. The fetus can be eaten even without shechita. Now is yalid lay. Now it's born. And now it's a Bechor. It's not roy lachila until we find out whether there's a mum or not. So itchile. Now a chacham shows up and checks it and sees a mum. Now it can be eaten. Achzel chacham ishtrile. So even though it was muktzah for part of the time, it's not muktzah all the time. There's no proof from there. Because there we're talking about a case where the dayanim were sitting right there where the animal gave birth. So right at the latest Abachor, it was Roy. So it was Roy the whole time. At the beginning of Shemash, it was Roy Agavime because of its mother. And now when it was born, it was Roy right away. So it never was Chazi and then Nidche because the dayanim were there. Now, Ikidiyami, other people learn this dialogue differently. Amalei ein muktzah l'chatzi Shabbos. It's all or none. Leiva Messiah. Let's say our Mishnah supports that. That if it's born with its mom, you can eat it. Ben Hashmoshes, it was Roy. Then Isyalid lay Idchile. Was pushed aside because we don't know whether you can eat it or not. Then Achzel Chacham, when you showed the Chacham, Ishtrile. So we see ein muktzah l'chatzi Shabbos. No proof from there, because there we're talking about dayanim saw it right away when it came out. So there was never a period of time where it was nidche. Toshma. Haya oichel banav, a person was eating grapes. Shabbos yontif. And he has extra grapes. You went up to the roof to dry them out to make raisins. Or or dried figs. If this all took place, Erev Yontif, Erev Shabbos, fine. But you got to designate those items. Regular grapes already muchan for achila. But dried raisins, you have to be mazmin them. Same thing with pears, chavushin, other types of dried fruits. Now, eat a chazu if you can eat them. They don't need azman. Eat the loy chazu if they're not ready to be eaten. They're not ready. Maybe he doesn't know if they're ready or not. Something that was designated became dry. That was not designated became dry. They didn't know that it was dry mibad yom. You only found out on Shabbos, and you determined that it was already dry from ben hashmoshes. It's mutter. They didn't put it out of their minds to eat it as food. That it's not going to be roy lachila. There as well, it was Roy, then pushed aside, then later on became Roy. If there's no issue of muktzah, why do you need to be mazmin? Elamai, what are you going to say? Yesh muktzah and kiyazim l'mayavi. So if it's not ready to be eaten, who cares that you designated it? So lo yitzricha di chazu v'lo yechazu. It's not fully Roy. Because the ikinshi the achli, the ikinshi the achli. Some people would eat the fruit in that stage, some would not. If he designated azmin gali daita that he would eat it, lo azmin lo gali daita, and then that would be muktzah. Amrav zeir toshma, mi poilin vadoshim, from lentils and legumes. You can chew those raw. Then once you throw them in a pot, well, it takes a long time to cook those things. And if now you want it to be cooked, so it's not raw. So itchiluchu. Gomer b'shlai, now after 2 hours of cooking, chazulu, now it's back ready to be eaten. And yet we say it's not usr. So it's a kasha on this issue of whether yesh muktzah or ein muktzah.